First coined by the National Party in the late 1970s, Black economic empowerment was suggested as a legislative initiative in which the apartheid system could be dismantled so that an inclusive order could be established in its place. However, it was only in 2003 State of the Nation address, then President Thabo Mbeki issued a directive on the promulgation on what would be known as broad-based Black economic empowerment. The goal of B.E.E. was to bolster the economic participation of non-white South Africans who had previously been excluded from adequate economic participation by the previous administration. Under President Mbeki, the government's approach to B.E.E. proceeded along three objectives. In addition to direct empowerment, B.E.E. would explicitly encompass human resource development and preferential procurement. Annually, the South African government spends about 800 billion on public procurement, which is pretty much the meat and bones of B.E.E. To effectively manage this process, government tenders are encased in a point system where the tenders are awarded to the bidder with the highest points. The system gives 80 points for price and 20 for B.E.E. status for tenders below a specified threshold, currently set at 50 million rand. It gives 90 points for price and 10 points for B.E. status for tenders above that threshold. At present, the government procurement budget exceeds its employee compensation budget. Organs of state issue a request for proposal for any work that they intend to source from the private sector. These private sector players must be B.E. compliant. Certain organs of state have also been known to set a minimum B.E. criteria relating to Black ownership or B.E. ratings before potential bidders may qualify to even submit bids. Since B.E.'s earliest implementation, the policy has been restrained and wrought with poor application measures that render it a tool for tender corruption. The association has become glaringly noticeable in respect to state procurement processes whereby tenders to supply goods and services are awarded to individuals with personal ties to the ruling party. One of the highest profile early examples was the South African arms deal initiated in 1999. B.E. front partners and politicians alike were paid exorbitant fees to smooth over what would be the largest foreign acquisition undertaken by South Africa's newly elected democratic government. Especially under the Zuma presidency, B.E. became synonymous with tender manipulation and corruption in state procurement, notably in respect to large value contract procurement to supply South African state-owned companies with goods and services. One of the key problems was summed up by journalist Jovial Rantawa back in 2007. Well before Jacob Zuma came to power and Zupta-linked state capture began, the government's declared B.E.E., wrote Mr. Rantawa, was to spend billions of rands on delivering much-needed goods and services while simultaneously empowering Black business. But what many suppliers did was to pocket the millions they received, buy bigger and better houses and the flashiest and biggest 4x4 by far, and then use what little was left over to deliver on their contracts with the state. Therefore, it's incredulous that B.E. laws still exist. South Africa's unemployment rate climbed to 35.3% in the fourth quarter of 2021, up from 34.9% in the previous period. It was the highest jobless rate since comparable data began in 2008. The number of unemployed persons increased by 278,000 to 7.9 million. Most Black South Africans have been provided with little to no assistance by the ruling party in navigating the wilderness of B.E. efforts, which are supposed to alleviate apartheid's economic shadow. According to the World Bank, South Africa is the most unequal country in the world. A common thread with B.E. ventures is their inability to scale their businesses without political interference. It's as if there's a general lack of requisite business acumen which can be applied successfully so that these businesses can prosper in free market systems. Hence why all these empowerment dalliances have yet to create products and services that can be enjoyed in international markets. The post-1994 B.E. activists are caught up in a climate of exuberant materialism and the adoption of the ends justifying the means. There's almost a scramble to acquire wealth in the shortest period possible, irrespective of the implication or consequences. The opportunities offered by Black economic empowerment can be equated to the gold rush of the mid-1800s. The only difference is that with B.E.E, none have struck gold. Furthermore, black businesses have not been able to overcome the old disease of Africa, namely tribalism and regionalism. What's even more sad is that the policymakers, through their inability to measurably scale black business, they have in almost 30 years since the end of apartheid inadvertently fueled the National Party's commitment to anti-black business. Particularly frustrating is that any vein of empowerment that has been achieved has been off the backdrop of businesses that were created during the apartheid era. In the sea of opportunity that is available through taxes, which pays for all this so-called empowerment, and I must point out, we have some of the most progressive residence-based taxation systems in the world. It's not cheap to be a South African citizen, but the opportunities amassed through our taxes only trickle down to a favored few. Far from reducing inequality, government policies such as B.E.E have created a small, wealthy black elite and a very large, poor, jobless, and mostly black underclass, with the result that inequality within the black population group now outstrips that between it and any other population group. Most of the benefits of high-stakes B.E.E deals have accrued to politically connected people like Edwin Sondi, who adopt a blasé attitude when rightly questioned about the legitimacy of their engagements with various political actors. In June 2021, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that South Africa's B.E.E strategy and legislation would be reviewed, especially to ensure that they are not further exploited for corrupt purposes. B.E.E impropriety has been an eyesore throughout the State Capture Commission, with some witnesses going as far as to use fetcook and self-raising flour analogies to explain away wasteful and dubious expenditure of the country's finances. The Commission recommended that consideration be given to the enactment of legislation for the following: the greater centralization of public procurement in certain aspects, the better harmonization of the legislation applicable to public procurement, the better guidance of public procurement officials in applying the legislation governing public procurement, the better training of public procurement officials, and the discrimination of any deviation based on the concept of sole service provider. Black economic empowerment is not the issue. It is the capricious nature in which the policies are applied that render B.E.E quite unsatisfactory. As pointed out by the State Capture Commission, there are clear areas where the policy needs to be amended. Being an open-ended measure has led to exploitation, corruption, and a large proportion of South Africa's resources and revenues benefiting local and foreign elites rather than the general population. On a societal level, B.E.E has taken away black people's self-determination, ability to self-mobilize and become unstuck from the long shadow that apartheid casts over our lives in present-day South Africa. The policies were at best supposed to be transitory, but so easily became permanent due to the laws being captured by special interests who seek to generate opportunities for rent-seeking. These policies have earnestly failed to create a meaningful change in the lives of ordinary black South Africans. I think we as ordinary citizens, more so black South Africans, have to start applying a meaningful critique of the legislature that has an overriding impact on our economic mobility. B.E.E laws have been in existence for the majority of South Africa's democratic dispensation. However, we can collectively agree that our lives are not reflective of any of the prosperity that it promised. But as J.P. Ngamo pointed out, we were originally justified to be suspicious of any political measures suggested by the National Party for the so-called embetterment of black South Africans. Unfortunately, our worst fears of such policy were realized.
Like back then, I'd listen to people who are like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to get a job, it's so hard to get a job. And you think to yourself, you're educated, like you qualified. Why?